Hello, viewers. Well, we just had the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, a Grand Prix that looks back at years of Formula One, the heritage of Formula One, and where better to have it than at the home of Formula One at Silverstone Racetrack on a boiling hot day. And we've had another excellent race there today as well. It really does bring the best out of the teams and the cars, and it's always a challenge, always has been. And it's great to see that it's still putting a lot of pressure on the cars and the tyres. Now, I'm joined again today by Tim. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Adam.
And Alex Gillen, our special guest today. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Alan. Yeah, hello, viewers. Good to be on this podcast. I'm quite excited to talk about this race today.
Yeah, good to have you on the show and spice up the chat. You know, break it up between myself and Tim, and perhaps, like you say, get some different perspectives on the discussion as well. So, second time at Silverstone in 2 weeks. It's so weird having these back-to-back races. I'm liking it, though. I'm liking the vibe. I feel like we're just keeping it going at the moment, and it's rolling quite well for us as fans watching. And I can imagine it's been pretty tough on the teams. But I think one of the highlights, obviously last weekend, Nico Hulkenberg had a clutch issue, which was a bit mysterious on his car, conspiracy theories. And this week, no problems with the clutch. He was very strong in qualifying. I have to say, great to see Nico Hulkenberg back in that car. We've got a little bit of there is a lot of topical elements around Racing Point. We're going to come back to those later. But what do you think, Alex, first about qualifying?
Yeah, I think you mentioned about it. Nico Hulkenberg, for me, was obviously the standout performance, having only done 2 race weekends this year. Of course, didn't even race last weekend either. He has had a lot of recent experience in Formula One, but to just jump straight in this team, without really any training, to get P3 ahead of Lance Stroll, who has actually impressed me recently. So I think that was really the standout performance for me. Perhaps a bit of underperformance of Max Verstappen, not too sure on that one, but of course, Mercedes out front, almost a second clear of the field. It's their car they built this year. It's just absolutely mega in qualifying, at least.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned Max. I mean, Max did a good job on the hard tyre, but I think what it shows is that, when you look at the issues that Alex Albon is having qualifying, there's definitely something about that Red Bull that it seems to be better in race trim than qualifying trim. Do you think at the moment? Because that was a great performance on the hard tyre, but Alex Albon does seem to be struggling to get the maximum pace out of the car when he needs it. Tim, what do you think about that?
It seems to be synonymous with any second driver in the Red Bull, though, isn't it? There always seems to be a bit of an issue with they have a prime driver and then they have a backup driver, it seems. But let's hope that those issues are sorted. Christian Horner has said that they need to make a better car for Alex. So, and they certainly seem to be supporting Alex, which is nice to see. That we're not Helmut Marko is not reaching into his black book and looking up Pierre Gasly's telephone number to see whether to put him in the car again and see whether he'll do a better job. So it was good. I think it's a great performance by Max on the hard. I think and also standout performance yesterday was great to see. Danny Rick qualifying 5th. He seemed to be on a bit of a quest at the moment in terms of that car.
Yeah, just on Red Bull, you mentioned there about the kind of would they replace Albon? I think they are making the right noises at the moment. They seem to be supporting him, but they've also done that previously. They've done that. They did that with Gasly. They said, oh yeah, he's our guy. We believe in him. He's and then next thing you know, he's out. So
true.
I guess we'll wait and see on Albon. I'm not too sure, but they are making the right noises. They do seem to be supporting him. I do think he's still got some promise, but he just does need to be better. I mean, he's got one of the hardest teammates to beat in all of F1, but he just needs to be at least within a couple of tenths of him really every race, doesn't he?
Yeah, totally.
He does. I will say on Alex and Alex's defence, I believe that Alex is every bit as good as Max, but I think the problem with Alex is he's having a problem, a bit like Jenson Button sometimes. Jenson was somebody, when the car was set up perfectly, he was unstoppable machine. If the car was off, sometimes he would struggle on his tyres quite badly. And I feel someone who's definitely struggling to communicate with his mechanics to find the setup that really works for him on that car. And remember, he is driving Max's car. He has to adapt himself to that car as the number 2 driver. I think that Gasly, for me, showed no signs of improvement at Red Bull at all last year. He had a couple of races where he did a little bit better, but if you look at, Albon outscored Max for most of the end of the last season. He would have got 2 podium finishes had Lewis not bumped him off. And I think that this year as well, I think that his qualifying has always let him down, but he's been stronger in the races, and that's meant some quite thrilling overtakes throughout the race. So I think Red Bull really need to sit down and try and work out where his pace is in qualifying and where he's struggling over the course that one lap. And they know, and I think that's why Christian Horner recognises, look, we can't keep kicking drivers out the car. We've got to work with someone and give them some confidence. If you're constantly worrying about keeping a drive, you're not going to be able to relax in that team and develop the car and build the mechanics around you. So they've got young drivers, good talent. Let's hope they stick with it. Right, on to today then. So before today, I'm just going to mention a bit of Formula 2. Earlier this morning, there was a front left tyre deflation in quite a similar way to what we saw last week this morning. And I think that in the Formula 2, we were seeing quite high tyre wear. There was blisters, perhaps some graining, and a tyre deflation of the front left tyre. That was quite interesting to see. So I think what we saw was, going into the race today, the conditions were going to still be very strong. And I'm sure that tough conditions like this on the tyre were influencing the teams. The teams will have seen that. But let's get on to the race then. So Max immediately passed Hulkenberg. I think Hulkenberg took it slow and steady at the start there, but keeping ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. And we saw Vettel spinning, obviously at the first corner. As somebody who understands, I mean, Alex, you obviously sim race a lot of the time. You race on the game. You understand wheel spin and everything out the various corners. We saw Daniel Ricciardo spinning. We saw Vettel spinning early on. But what do you make about this for someone as experienced as Vettel making a mistake like that?
Yeah, I mean, I won't pretend that I know what it's like to drive a Formula One car. I mean, as much as I do play all the games there, of course, never quite like real life.
The influence of what he's doing, you understand where his mind needs to be in terms of getting on the power when you're on a bumpy bit of track like that. The logic would tie in the feeling of the car.
Yeah, well, me and my flatmate watched the race together, and I said to him earlier, straight after the spin, I said, that's a rookie mistake he's made there. It looks like he's perhaps taken a bit too much curve on the inside, ended up touching the grass or whatever it is on the inside there, and then just put his foot down too much, got some wheel spin and spun it. And it's not something you expect from really any established Formula One driver, let alone a 4-time world champion Ferrari driver. So, we've seen a lot of mistakes from him lately. I don't know whether it's the pressure building within the team, whether he's lost something special. I don't know. I mean, it's just not good enough, though, really, is it? He's spinning on the first turn last.
He's a 4-time world champion in a car where he qualified on the front row and only ever won from the front of the race. So he's probably one of the best drivers out there that can deliver if he was in a top seat. He just can't drive in the pack. I think he buckles under pressure and makes sloppy mistakes. And I'm beginning to wonder now that if he has signed a deal with Aston Martin next year, do they really want that? Because they're not going to be. They might be in a Spec 2 Mercedes, where we want to look into it, but it's not going to be fun to the pack every week. So I think it's. I'm just curious to see what Aston Martin / Racing Point are going to do on that deal. Whether they really want somebody that isn't as reliable as a 4-time world champion should be.
Yes, you can't help but look at that and think, come on. I mean, I watched it and thought, well, Sebastian should know better than that. You know that there's not going to be much grip there. You're going over some curb. You must have some feeling of the car. It's like his head is in a different place. He's struggling to cope with, maybe he's thinking about 10 laps from now or what his strategy is. Or it would be really interesting to know, if he was honest with his team, what was actually going through his mind. I find that when you're whether it's your sim racing or you're on a track or whatever, driving a car, your mind has to be on what you're doing. If it floats off, you're going to make mistakes. And I do feel that mistakes like this are sort of rookie errors. And he really should, someone with his experience should be doing better. Of course, that dropped him to the back, and any strategy he had then, which actually probably wouldn't have been too bad, it was kind of out the window. But moving on, we have obviously Max was hassling the Mercedes early on. In a way, I think initially I was quite surprised to see the Mercedes just not pulling away. The field spread wasn't that high. Everybody couldn't seem to escape anyone. Max was asked to sort of drop back a bit and said, no, I'm not going to drive like a granny or something like that. And also, you got to think, Max had a lonely drive last week. I was watching it this week, and I was initially thinking, Max is 3 seconds behind the Mercedes and 3 seconds ahead of Hulkenberg. He's probably not going to see another car today. But he had different plans, and as did the tyre wear. So great to see Max feeling a bit more racy there, Alex. What was you thinking about that point in the race?
Yeah, so I tweeted this out towards the end of the race. I guess all the engineers will figure it out exactly what happened here. But to me, I think all the drivers were just completely up against a full-on thermal limit with the tyres. They just weren't able to push, particularly when we were on board with the Mercedes. They just looked like they were really cruising around. I said at the time, it looks like they're on an outlap here. They were really, really cruising around at nowhere near what they can do, particularly when you compare it to quali. I know they had race fuel on, but they were just so slow. And I just do feel like they were like, right, well, the tyre temperature can't go above, I don't know what it is, let's say it's 100 degrees. And they were just constantly on that 100 degrees. And if they were pushed any more, it went too high. And, they already had blistering, despite how slow they were going. So I really feel like that was quite a leveler today, which is why we saw Red Bull able to be actually quicker than them in the race. We had a direct comparison towards the end there when they were both on hards, and Verstappen was able to pull away from Bottas, which is, considering Mercedes were a second a lap quicker in qualifying, that car is capable of going a lot quicker, but just wasn't able to use it in the race today. And I just feel like that's entirely tyre temperature. Obviously Red Bull, is it set up, or is it maybe their car's just a bit friendly on the tyres, just able to keep them, just a couple of degrees cooler and able to push that, 2% more that enable them to just be a little bit quicker. That was my theory anyway. I don't know what you guys thought of this race today, because it was quite an unusual race, wasn't it? We saw an overcut work. I don't think in the Pirelli era we've seen a single overcut work. So yeah, it was a really strange one.
I think one thing which I really liked, and Alan, we've talked about this a lot, in that the power of the engineer versus the power of the driver. And the one thing which I loved, I almost had you sort of in my head as this happened on track, when Max said, no, this is the only time I'm going to be up near a Mercedes here. We've got to go for this, And it's like, I kind of feel like Max was saying, the tyres feel fine. Let's do it. Let's go for this. I don't need an engineer telling me what to do. And I kind of felt like that was happening through the race. It's almost like the drivers were actually sort of sensing. You had Lewis saying, is my tyre going to explode? It feels like it's going to go, And I think had he perhaps given, we asked so many times about scrap the engineer, scrap all of the computers telling what the tyre data is. Why can't we go back to just drivers sort of feeling the cars? Wouldn't it have been so much better? Had Lewis probably would have gone, no, I want to pit. I'm coming into the pits. Stop. It would have been the wrong decision, but it would have changed even more the dynamic of the race as well. So I think I kind of felt like this is a wonderful insight into, let's give the drivers more control. Crikey, we have to do that in the game. It's always, we've always said, it's a harder battle to win in the actual game than it is to actually win in the race. So that's what my big takeaway from this race was, and it was great to see.
It was, it's funny. I've always said that I want data taken away from the drivers. I want the driver to feel it, use the force. What do you think that tyre is going to do? What are you feeling? Do you feel you can take care of your tyres? If drivers weren't aware of how long a tyre was supposed to last, and they didn't have live data, they'd have to drive around and consider it themselves and think about it. When you look at some of the great races of history, you'll often have the teams putting the pit board out saying pit now, and racing drivers saying no, and I'm going to keep going, and angering their teams, and the teams are stressing, and the racing driver says, no, I can feel it. And that can make all the difference with changeable conditions and everything else. Once you take out the computer perfection, that's when you start to find the real drivers coming through. And I think today, Max had that feeling for the car. He felt good, and I'm glad he went with it, and I'm glad it worked out. There is that concern that, is he going to suddenly, his tyres going to suddenly go? But at the same time, my feeling at the time was, hang on a minute, he's pushing the Mercedes here. If he drops back, they will slow down a bit, and they won't be as under pressure. So in a way, you kind of need that pressure to make them grind their tyres. I will just say, actually, you were mentioning, Alex, the thermal limit. It's quite interesting, isn't it? We knew the temperatures were going to be hot. They've raced at hot tracks before. It's not new. What happens to all of the historical data? Do we suddenly forget how tyres perform in hot conditions? It does seem strange to me that teams are always almost pretending like it's something new and that we've never encountered this before. And it's a high-speed circuit, but we've had temperatures as hot, if not hotter, at Monza, which is a high-speed circuit, a very bumpy surface, comparatively speaking. And yet the team seem to get a handle on it. What do you think about that in terms of a historical sort of perspective, chaps? I don't know which, if any of you have a feeling on that.
Yeah, I think today really the tyres were bordering on, not good enough. That they just, obviously we know that the Pirellis are sort of designed to wear, and they do have a thermal window that they need to sit within, that the drivers need to keep them within in order for them to perform and all this sort of thing. That's fine. But today, I mentioned the Mercedes they were crawling round, and we saw pretty severe blisters, even despite the fact they were crawling around. The hard tyres were only capable of, well, I think Charles Leclerc probably did the longest, did he? About 30 laps or so, I think it was, maybe a little bit more than that. But I do think they were bordering on, not being good enough for Formula One. But let's not forget, Pirelli developed tyres for this year. They tried to fix all the thermal issues. They developed the tyres for this year. The drivers tried them and went, no, we don't like these, probably because they were, a second a lap slower. They felt harder, but then they would have been more usable. They were also designed for this year's cars in mind. Went out effectively on last year's tyres. I'm sure they've made some tweaks, but, I saw someone tweet out today that actually maybe the Mercedes, I think they're somewhere around a second a lap faster year on year to what they were last year. Is that just too quick for these tyres, particularly around a circuit like Silverstone? That, you mentioned Monza there. Monza has got higher average speed, but actually that high-speed corners, there isn't so many at Monza. Whereas Silverstone, there's so many high-speed corners. I mean, is it Stowe that there's, seriously quick through? Are Cops as well? The amount of energy they're putting through these tyres, with the amount of downforce they've got, putting 300 kilometers an hour through a corner, it boggles the mind. And I do just wonder that almost the drivers have sort of dug their own grave a little bit with this one, with rejecting what Pirelli wanted to do this year. And let's not forget what they were asked to do. I really hate it when Pirelli get criticism and all those things. Formula One said, "Hey Pirelli, please build us degrading tyres. We want to get a 2-stop race on average." And they do that, and then people go, I don't like Pirelli, this is rubbish, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's not Pirelli's fault. Look at Formula One. It's not Pirelli. Pirelli have done exactly what's asked of them. They were then asked to build a tyre that had a much larger thermal window, a much larger operating window in terms of temperature. They did that, and the drivers went, no, we don't like these. So, I mean, Pirelli have done everything right, but it's Formula One. It's the drivers that they're effectively holding them back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I suppose it kind of frustrates me, the criticism, because I want imperfection. I don't want tyres that are perfect. Formula One, I see it sometimes when they say, the track surface might damage the car. If the driver drives off the track onto those bumps, it might damage the car. Well, don't drive off the track then. Why do we need perfection? Why do we need the tyres might not last precisely the laps that Pirelli expected because computer said so. Well, then this is where the level of perfection has reached a point where we say, no, where is the human element of racing? And I think this is where I would love it if Pirelli said, there's your tyres, we're not going to tell you how long they last, let your computers tell you. And then they have to go out there and figure it out for themselves, and with less practice sessions. But either way, I think the tyres obviously added a lot to the race. I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add to that, Tim.
Not really. I mean, it's just to echo both your points. Really, I think there's a statistic that came out after last week's Grand Prix was the cars are pulling 5G in some of those corners through maggots, packets, and so forth. So I think that I would imagine coming to Silverstone, which is unusually warm this year. I would say the teams probably look at it and saying it's new because they don't have much data on a really hot Silverstone. So they probably come here with historical data of sort of 20 degrees air temperature, So I would imagine that's probably where they're coming from on that aspect. But no, I think, tyres are tyres, and say that they try to make them more durable than they say, then they try to change them to appeal to the drivers. We've only got one more year of the 13-inch wheel, then we go to 17, 18-inch wheels and low-profile tyres. So I'm sure we'll start all of this conversation again as to whether the tyres are any good or not.
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake about it. Mercedes made a mistake today. I mean, they did their running on Friday. It's not like it was freezing cold on Friday and suddenly, no one expected it to be hot today. It's been hot all weekend. They saw it going. They had Friday practice. I don't know. I don't understand how they've made this much of a mistake. Whether it is just that literally their car just doesn't work. Of course, they can't develop a change to the car over the course of the weekend. But surely they can do something in the setup. I was amazed to see them struggling that much. I honestly thought they were just cruising, and then they turn the wick up, and then they just sort of fly away whenever they need to. And they just didn't have that in their pocket today. And how dominant we've seen them be this season, for them to make this much of a mistake in car development, in setup. As you say, we do go to hot parts of the world. We often go to Bahrain and all these sort of places that are very, very hot. This isn't a brand new thing that the temperatures suddenly go, oh no, the air temperature's 30 degrees or whatever it was, and the track's 40, 50 degrees. This is very much a thing we get all the time in Formula One. The fact that Mercedes were just completely unable to deal with that today is a huge mistake. And I'm sure they'll do lots of analysis and try to not let it happen again, because obviously, by their high standards, it's not good enough.
It shows what a knife edge, doesn't it? That these cars are set up. It's such a knife edge that the temperature raises. I mean, it was a couple of degrees hotter, and there was a bit more rubber laid on the track, and track was a little bit faster, and the air density changes as well if there's moisture in the air. There's all these elements, and suddenly they're putting too much energy through the tyre, and it's interesting the way it sort of fell apart from today. So, I mean, mid part of the race, we had Hamilton leading, Max in second, Bottas in third. Mercedes opted to bring Bottas in. I was surprised, actually. If I was Valtteri, I would have stayed out and I'd have said, what's happening to Lewis? And I'd have said, Lewis is struggling a bit on his tyres. I'd say, good. And I'd sit there and I wouldn't pit. I'd say, I'm first. I'm pitting first, so he can wait.
But he's a number two driver.
I'd have left. Exactly. And so, unfortunately, number two driver gets pulled in. And he wasn't the only one that got pulled in today. And of course, then obviously that put him out behind Max. Max had to push on the medium tyres. But there was one element with Hamilton. I got to say, it was a very suspicious-looking pit lane entry. What did you make of that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I was fully expecting him to get a penalty. I mean, he was still locked up after the speed limit line. I mean, presumably they test the speed right on that line. I don't know exactly where they measure it, but it did look like he was overspeed. And I was like, well, he's going to get a penalty. I wasn't even thinking, or maybe he will. I was like, that looks like that was a penalty. Of course, we don't see the speed as such from an off-board view. But yeah, I mean, I will say once he was past the line, he then had to speed up to the pit limiter line. So presumably he was probably right on the limit and then slowed down too much, which is why I was still locked up and then sped up. So, obviously all these things in Formula 1 are automatic as far as I'm aware. So it's very much this car was speeding, automatically reported to stewards, or, as good as automatically. And then, of course, it's a very obvious penalty from there. It's a very black and white thing, isn't it, speeding in the pit lane? So presumably he wasn't, but it did look very, very close. And I think that just showed how dead those tyres were when he did eventually come in, because he just couldn't get the thing slowed down, did he? How many times over the weekend has he done that pit entry? Probably, well, including last weekend, probably done it 30 or 40 times. And that one time, he must have been so close to getting the penalty there.
That was right on the edge. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you took the words out of my mouth, Alex, and that you heard the engine note sort of go, to go back up to the pit limit speed, I'd imagine. So yeah, I think you say it was just worn tyres, and it just looked more dramatic than it actually was. But hey, look, they do this week in, week out, and it's all about those fine margins, isn't it? So that's why they're the best in the world, isn't it? So that's what we claim.
Absolutely. Do you guys think that a pit lane limiter, that drivers should control their speed, and that if they went over that speed, do you think that would make a difference to the pits? Because if a driver had to, cruise control their way through the pits, that would make it add a bit of an extra challenge for the driver rather than just pressing a button.
I would like to know how easy it is to control a speed when the movement of the accelerator pedal is only about an inch. So I mean, I've always imagined the Formula One cars, and you might tell me more from your sort of esports driving experience, but it's sort of go or stop. So I'm not sure if you can control a car at 60 or 50 kph, however fast it is, through a pit lane manually.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to be difficult, but do we want them to build these cars so that they, are nice and easy to control at 60 kilometers an hour, or do we want to build these cars to be as fast as they're possible? So, as you said, I imagine it would be quite difficult for the driver to keep even within 5 kilometers of the limit, just because that's not what these cars are designed for. And actually, to me, that's such a minor part of the racing. It's also a safety element. Let's not forget, when they've got the limiter on, they cannot physically go over that. They could have a malfunction, they could have a throttle failure, or they could just accidentally press the pedal too much, get too much wheel spin, and end up going 100 kilometers an hour, hitting people. I think that's the sort of thing that is such a minor part of racing that actually it's totally fine. It is. They still, of course, have to slow it down to that speed limiter. There is still a driver element of it. But I think once they're there, I think definitely it's the right thing to keep it. And it's interesting, Alan. There's a couple of points you've brought up already on this podcast where I think you're very much an old school kind of racer type person. You want it to be all down to the drivers and, just give them the car and then let them get on. We'll get rid of team radio probably and all this sort of thing. But, for me, Formula One it's not just about the drivers. I mean, obviously the drivers are the heroes of it. And I understand that's what a lot of people watch it for and that sort of thing. But for me, Formula One is a lot about the engineering as well. It's about the absolute engineering excellence of Formula One, and everything is fine margins and everything is perfection. And I love all that. I love all the, in the past you've had the F ducts and double diffusers and all that sort of stuff, and it is all sort of unseen off-track engineering sort of things. But I love all that. I do agree with what you said a little bit earlier on about engineers managing strategies and things. Obviously it would be a bit better for the driver to manage it, but also they do have an input. Often Mercedes will be saying, oh, Lewis, we want to bring you in, and he's saying, well, no, my tyres are fine. And I think today it would have been cool. I don't know if they did or not, but it would have been cool if they did give Hamilton a choice as to whether to come in. Because I think he came in, was it about 11 laps from the end for his last set of hard tyres? Could he have made it to the end? Obviously with the failures of last week, you'd assume no. But actually, on a tyre that's a step softer on the tyres that he did last weekend with, I think he still did like 30 laps or so, and still at a reasonable pace. Verstappen wasn't that much quicker than him. So it would have been really cool if they did give him the choice. Say, look, Lewis, we are worried about these tyres. We do think there is a chance they might blow up, but also you might then get the win. We can pit you now. You'll be nice and safe to the end. You can probably come back to P3, maybe P2, but realistically, we don't think you'll be able to win this race by doing that. What do you want to do? I think, again, I don't know if they did, but I think it'd be really cool if they gave drivers just a bit more choice like that. And, at the end of the day, Lewis, as much as we want a good team result, this is your driver's championship you're after here. And we want you to decide. You're the one feeling the tyres, and we're asking you to decide what level of risk you'd like to take this afternoon.
Yeah, I think that Red Bull were managing it today. I think there was an 11-second gap at that point, and they were holding it that 11 seconds. And I felt that Red Bull could have knocked off 2-3 seconds a lap. But they were saying, if we knock off that speed and we get up to Lewis and then we've burned our tyres and we can't get past Lewis can win. Or if we speed up, Lewis is going to pit anyway, and then we're going to have no tyres to fight him at the end. So a little bit of strategy. They were kind of goading, I think, Red Bull into pushing a bit harder to cut that down. But either way, it's like you were saying. It's funny. There was Peter Windsor was doing the commentary on Formula 3 and Formula 2 this weekend, and I really noticed there's a division between the young F1 fans and the older F1 fans, and the different things we remember in the heritage of different Grand Prix and what we want. I suppose there's a part of me that wants the driver to be a much bigger element in the car than he is currently. And I felt a driver could bring magic to a car years ago. You could see, if you watched the Formula 3 race, there was a bit of action on the last few corners today that was amazing. But you saw, the drivers getting wheel spin. You saw the cars moving around a lot. It was an extension of their bodies. I kind of feel in Formula One, there's so much control now that it doesn't matter how much good a driver is. There's so much control by the team in terms of the power, in terms of the strategy, that the driver isn't able to bring that magic. And that's something that I hope that when they do remove some of the gizmos in 2022, that it can bring back closer racing and give the driver the decision-making process to really run those cars. We'll never see quite what we did years ago, but I hope that there is some sort of balance in terms of the sport of racing, and that's what I'd like to see. Just continuing on that, actually, talking about a driver bringing something to a car, though, I felt Charles Leclerc was doing an incredible job today. He sort of popped up towards the end of the race in 4th place. He'd been going round, minding his own business behind the racing points, and then suddenly it all kind of fell together for him, didn't it? That one-stop strategy Tim, what was you making of Charles's performance today?
He was like the equivalent of Max Verstappen last weekend, really, wasn't he? He was keeping himself to himself and just keeping out of trouble and being consistent. He's becoming the de facto leader of Ferrari now, and Ferrari should be wise in their head and investing everything they can in him, because clearly Vettel's on his way out. So no, I thought he did a great job, and more of that. And he's already scored a couple of podiums this year already. So as long as he keeps his head down, and whilst Ferrari work through their issues, he will be at the front fighting for wins again soon, I have no doubt.
It's quite fascinating for me because last year we saw Ferrari and Leclerc very much very similar. They were always very, very close, always within a few tenths of each other, always on the same place on the racetrack. But then this year that just hasn't happened, has it? And I do wonder why, and I'll be interested to get both of your two thoughts on why. Is it because Vettel's mind, you mentioned it earlier, Alan, is Vettel's mind on next season already? Is he thinking, well, Ferrari's over, I'm done with these, the dream's dead, whatever, I don't really care anymore, and he's sort of almost taking his eye off the ball in a sort of grander sort of way? Or is it Ferrari themselves? Obviously Ferrari have going to keep Leclerc, and you'd assume that he'll be the number one driver going into next year and the years to come. Are they just putting all their eggs behind him? You'd assume that they are concentrating more on him, but actually, does it make this much difference? Because Vettel hasn't really even been comparable to Leclerc this season, has he? Which is shocking, really, considering how close they were last season, considering success Vettel has had in the past. For him to be, really handsomely beat by Charles Leclerc. Well, why is that? Well, what do you guys think?
Just to put this into perspective, overall, I'm looking at the Formula One standings at the moment. Sebastian Vettel lies 13th in the table on 10 points. And you really look at names above him: Gasly, Sainz, Ocon, Ricciardo, Perez, Stroll, Albon, Norris, and then Leclerc in fourth on 45 points. That almost just tells you the story, doesn't it? I mean, there's such a disparity between the two drivers. He's not racing as a four-time world champion. His head is clearly not in it. And it's all going wrong on qualifying day, isn't it? Because he didn't get through to quali 3 again yesterday. I do wonder whether it's whether the mystery over the Ferrari engine fuel flow saga from last year, which no one really knows about, and they got a slap on the wrist and nothing was ever done about it. I wonder whether that sort of mindset, the fact that does Vettel realise that he was driving an illegal car last year, and he's just like, this isn't the Ferrari that I dreamed about driving for when Michael Schumacher was winning all of these titles that he wanted to copy, so to speak, really. So I don't know. I think the end of this year probably can't come sooner for Vettel to recharge and reset and then come back, hopefully, Vettel version 2.
I will say this echoes the 2014 season. Looking here, Daniel Ricciardo came in. He frankly destroyed Vettel that season. He was driving beautifully. And, you look at the end of the season, Daniel Ricciardo, 238 points, Sebastian Vettel, 167. He came in and beat a four-time world champion, much closer, at his home team, much closer to his success. He does seem very despondent this year. I don't see any energy from him. He says he's pushing the car, but I can't see any positive body language in the way the car's driving at all. He's just not happy. And now in Formula One, it's amazing how psychology controls the top drivers. If they don't feel like they can win, they lose that speed. You'd get one good result and suddenly it lifts them. And I feel that for him, wherever he is right now, he's just not in a good place. Now, if I was a team looking at Sebastian right now, I can't say to you I see anything in him that I would want in my team. He's not showing me anything. He's paid a lot of money to do a good job. Life might be a bit despondent. He might be a bit despondent, but get on with it. You're in a Ferrari. You paid a wedge of cash, and you've had a stack load of success. get your head in the right place. And this is it in Formula One. He knows better. As a Formula One team looking to take on a new driver, I mean, if I was Racing Point, I'd be saying, wow, look what Hülkenberg did. A tremendous result for him this weekend. Just moving on from that now, obviously Hülkenberg moved on to soft tyres mysteriously at the end. I guess to get the fastest lap, that must have been what it was. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I saw that and I thought that's a very strange decision. I mean, they weren't even qualifying on the softs, let alone in the race. So as much as there was only a few laps to go, it did seem a very strange decision. The team did say after the race that it was because they saw that their rear tyres were in really, really critical state. That could very easily be an excuse. Maybe they didn't want a substitute driver to finish ahead of their full-time driver. Who knows? There's a little conspiracy theory for you there. I assume they thought, well, maybe we'll go for the fastest lap. And I also assume they didn't have any other tyres left. I haven't actually seen the stints. Obviously, maybe he'd had run too hard at this point, didn't have any medium tyres left. That's me completely guessing now. I'm not too sure. But it was a strange decision. But actually, in the end, he sort of only lost one position. Lance Stroll ended up getting overtaken by Albon, but only by a couple of seconds. So then would Hülkenberg been able to hold off? I'm not too sure. But yeah, it did seem, particularly for the softs, on a day like today when these tyres were so critical, I can only hope at least that they had no other tyres left. If they had other tyres left and they chose the softs, it is a very fishy decision.
Was an odd one. I love a good conspiracy theory. It did make me look at first number one, number two drivers. Like obviously Leclerc finishing ahead of Vettel. We have Norris, who's been consistently doing better than Carlos. Norris is, I guess you could call him the de facto number one at McLaren now that Carlos is moving on. Hamilton finishing ahead of Bottas. Stroll finishing ahead of Hülkenberg. It's just funny how it works out, isn't it? Those number one drivers just coming through there, all a coincidence.
Also, isn't it just wonderful how Racing Point scored 14 points in this race, and they were penalised 15 points. So it's almost like they've made up for their acclaimed misdemeanors, should we say?
Well, with the same brake ducts, of course. They used the exact same spec.
Exactly. It's not a technical infringement.
No, we'll get to that in just a moment then. So I guess that's it, really. I mean, like you say, Max, strong performance from him. Crossed the line. Lewis in second place, taking Valtteri towards the end there. I would say an unhappy Valtteri there, and Valtteri making up third place. Leclerc over the moon in fourth place there, and Alex Albon. I will say, what an amazing journey he had from falling all the way pretty much to the back at the start with an early stop, getting trapped behind Gasly, all kinds of dramas. But some mega overtakes from him today as well. And then, of course, we had the Stroll, Hülkenberg, Ocon, Norris and Kvyat making up the rest of the top 10. So a good race today. I enjoyed the race throughout. Just before we talk about some of the other moments, I suppose a driver of the day. Alex, what are you thinking driver of the day? Tough question.
Yeah, it is tough. I think pretty much what was given officially on the broadcast is probably about right. I think Max Verstappen has to be the driver of the day. It was a fantastic drive by him. It was, I tweeted out just after the race, it was a mixture of aggression and tyre management. And he really nailed it. He even overrode the team at one point, something that I'm sure you were very happy to see, Alan, by saying, hey guys, I'm not waiting anymore. Hamilton's coming. I'm pushing now. And then just drove away from Bottas. Then, he ended up crossing the line 11 seconds ahead of Hamilton. So really fantastic race by Verstappen. We know he's an excellent driver, but he's also now got the sort of experience and the knowledge of how Formula 1 works, how these tyres work, to really manage a race perfectly, especially on a day like today when management was so difficult. We saw everybody struggling, even the likes of Mercedes that are known for their engineering excellence and managing races down to a T, even they were struggling. So Max Verstappen to manage that race was fantastic. And then, definitely an honourable mention to Nico Hülkenberg. I mentioned him earlier, but really great drive from him. I was really impressed. I was interested to see he was consistently about 2 seconds ahead of Lance Stroll, but not faster. I did wonder whether his race pace might be a little bit quicker or a little bit slower than Lance Stroll. They were, of course, managing tyres. We don't know, an exact raw pace, if you like, but obviously a great performance for him. P7 in the end. He was sort of P5, even P4 a lot of the race. I really hope we can see him in a Formula One car again soon. I think it would be sad if he's not given a drive, at the earliest of next year.
Absolutely. Tim, your thoughts on driver of the day?
Credit where it's due, really. I'm not the biggest Max Verstappen fan, but it was an easy decision this week. Max Verstappen, driver of the day for me. I was saying, from what I said earlier on around him almost like taking control, saying, no, I want to go for this. I want to race the Mercedes. I'm gonna go for it. And fair play to him. He seems to control the pace, and he's taking a little bit of tips from Lando and Danny Rick in terms of bringing some personality into who he is as a driver as well. Because his little comment on the last lap about to his engineer to remember to hydrate did make me chuckle. So no, I think great to see. If we can get that every weekend, I think that'll certainly make Lewis happy as well, because he keeps saying that he wants competition, and today was a good sign of that. But that's the only comment for me on driver of the day today.
Absolutely. Well, I had a Max attack. I think Max was myself driver of the day today. It was just, he couldn't do any more better. It was just a perfect race for him, and it all worked out. And like you say, a bit of personality. I love a bit of personality. There are drivers who have no personality. They are so boring. And when you meet them in real life, and there's a few of them I've met, and it's like, oh, Alan, do you want to have a chat with this person or that? But I'm like, nah, it's too boring. And you get stars in Formula One who are like, that's a star, a bit of personality. But I will say, Leclerc, Alex Albon, what a drive from him to come from last, get up to 5th place. He's got the race pace. He's just got to sort out that qualifying. And of course, Hulkenberg, coming to the team. I mean, as I say, I think he would have finished in 5th place had he not had that stop that obviously he needed.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned there about sort of personalities in Formula One. I had a chat recently to Brendan Lee, the double F1 esports champion. Of course, he's had some media training, some PR training, whatever you want to call it. And he says that all the esports guys do now, that they have some media training. And actually, you have to kind of be careful not to lose your personality through that media training. Now, obviously, Formula One drivers get an awful lot of media training. That's they're representing all their brands and their sponsors. It's very important to make sure that they don't, often at least, say the wrong thing in front of the cameras and to the press. But I do wonder how much of it is just their media training and they're just regurgitating the things that they think they should say and all this sort of thing, or but then I guess it comes back to how comfortable you are. Max Verstappen is very comfortable in Formula One. He's got no risk of losing his seat. He's got no risk of finding a drive elsewhere if he does. He's got a good salary. He's got the results. He's performing great. He is comfortable, so he can say silly things over the radio and not worry and all this sort of thing. So he is obviously very comfortable. Whereas some drivers perhaps are struggling a bit more. Maybe they want to seem to the sponsors, you want to sponsor me, you want me in your team because I'm a professional and I say the right things. But there obviously is a lot to that personality side of it. But I think just coming back to my point, I do wonder how much of it is just purely that media training that's almost getting rid of their personality, which of course we don't like to see, but you can understand why they have all that training.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean that media training is very structured, so that when they literally tell you how to stand, where to stand, to make sure that if there's sponsor logos behind you, if possible, your car's behind you. Can you see your car? Make sure you stand in front of your car. They talk to you very, very much about when to be evasive, how to be evasive, what questions you can answer, what you can't answer. So it's almost a political response to everything, especially the world we have today. You've got to be very careful how you put things, and I think it's a shame because it does mean you lose some personality. But when there's big brands involved, that is an aspect. However, I feel that some of them really, I've seen a few of them behind the scenes, and some of them really don't have much to say at other times either. It's funny, but I think Kimi Räikkönen, everyone goes on about Kimi Räikkönen, for me he was funny 10, 15 or whenever years ago when he came into it. But the joke kind of wore off for me. I just kind of found him a bit boring in the end. And I know people talking about him being a party animal. It's like, well, he likes to have a few drinks, but there really isn't much more to it than that. But it's interesting when you see how the control of people and what they're supposed to say. And it does take a bit of personality away, but I don't think Kvyat would have much more personality, with or without media training. What you see is what you get with some of these guys. And I just think, there are some drivers you say, I could go for a beer with Jensen Button, we could have a good chat. And there are some drivers that you simply say, nah, it's not going to happen. So
yeah, but let's not forget you are media yourself, Alan. So even if you're off record, yeah, I know you can kind of get a feel for people's personality off record, but they do still have to be careful what they say to you, even if it's technically off record. I think a better measure of someone's real personality would be when they're not speaking to a journalist or anyone in the media. They're at home, they're texting their mates, they're on, maybe they're playing FIFA at home with a few of their mates from back home or from schoolmates or whatever, that sort of thing. So I've heard the odd thing about, I know Lando Norris often mixes with a few people that I know, and I know a couple of people that played some games with him, sort of thing. And so that I think that's probably a bit of a better measure of personality. Of course, Lando is probably the exception to all of this, because his of course personality has really shone through, which is really fantastic to see. And I think that's really catapulted him to be one of the most liked drivers in F1, I'd even say.
Yeah, Lando's. You've got something like I say. You've got some drivers who are boring, and some like Daniel Ricciardo. Great, you could have a good laugh with him. Lando Norris. There are certain other drivers that they just don't. Honestly, on and off camera, they just don't. They don't have much to talk about. And I think it's funny. I was amazed to see the freedom that McLaren have given Lando. Watching him streaming sort of 6 months ago, and thinking, my goodness, this just wouldn't happen years ago. It was very much a gentleman's sport.
Dennis must be thinking, what the hell is this all about? But Zach Brown is a very different character, isn't he? And mine works at McLaren and through both the Ron Dennis era and now the Zach Brown era. And no surprise, the company culture is a lot more buoyant under Zach Brown's leadership than it ever has been. So, we've got a conversation we had on the last podcast was around corporate culture and what that brings to a team, and it's those sorts of team environments that allow drivers to come to the fore a little bit more. But yeah, it's great to see more drivers defining themselves a little bit more, because they do have a platform in the world of social media, and they do have a powerful voice. And I think, say, at the moment, with so many things going in the world, politics and perceptions of the world, it's those voices that they've got to be on it at all times, because one wrong word hasn't really sort of impacted a Formula One driver much. I suppose Hamilton to a point, but he does have a very unique platform anyway. But so that they do have to be careful at all times.
Yeah, I would just say, actually, George Russell's been one that's, he's come out, he's been strong. He's always said what he thought. The other day when he came out about Red Bull making Alex look like an idiot, I thought, well, that's strong, that's good. We love a bit of chat. He didn't hold back, And then Red Bull came out and Christian admitted that they let Alex down in Hungary qualifying. So, it's nice that we need a bit of that. We need a bit of chit chat from these guys. We need a bit of freedom. Otherwise, they are just robots in the car. But it very much is. As much as we talk about what you can and can't say, I think that affects the younger drivers more than some of the adults. But I think if you've got personality, Daniel Ricciardo, if he's not smiling, then where is he? He needs to be free to be who he is. And I think that's, as I say, that's team culture as well that sort of allows that. And I think him and Lando together in McLaren next year, that's going to be a party.
Can't wait.
Great fun for those two. I would just say today, didn't it feel good just seeing somebody different competing for the lead? Knowing that there was battles throughout the field, not just a battle for third place. I thought it really added to the race today. And I think that these last two races, just for a moment, a glimpse of another team getting into that Mercedes mix, just felt so good. And I think it opened up the race today. Just to change subject now, move on to just the Racing Point. I think just to finish off, Racing Point brake issue is going to come up this week. We had a statement from Lawrence Stroll. They definitely seem to be in some trouble, don't they? I don't know if you guys have heard the whole speech yet, but it seems to me like this could end up a bit messy. What are we thinking about this in terms of Formula One? Is it like the McLaren issue years ago? Is
I
it something
don't think it is, and I interesting conversation listening to Brundle and co talking about it before the race, and I think the bigger question is over customer parts and customer cars, and whether that rule is going to come back. And people sort of say, well, that's against the DNA of Formula One. To say the point that Brundle race was like they were celebrating Sterling Moss, and said that well, Sterling Moss won a lot of his races in a customer Cooper and a customer Lotus. If you're talking about the DNA of Formula One, customer cars have always existed, and then you look back at more recently, the Haas was pretty much a copy of the Ferrari when it came in, and Toro Rosso when they basically bought the Minardi team. Red Bull and Toro Rosso swapped details for 2 or 3 years under a pre-arranged agreement. So and then there's this. I think the grey area is this bit about what's a listed part and what's an unlisted part, and at what point did that part become listed, and the knowledge that the designers knew about that part by that when that changeover happened. That's where it came under, where everyone's sort of querying over, and I think where the FIA are getting a little bit in there, twisting their pants a little, is around Racing Point never asked us about the legalities of this particular grey area. So I'm not sure whether people are looking into it a little bit more. I'd rather sort of hold back and sort of see what really happens over the next couple of weeks and months and see what the long-term impact is. But I can't believe it within me to sort of think that Racing Point have cheated. I just can't. I don't believe that a company that employs 500 people would go about trying to find a way to cheat their way just to earn some to get a better car. It doesn't sit well with me at all. If they are proven to be 100% cheated, and this is the reason why, then they should be thrown out of the sport for the year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a valid point. I think I don't think they have. I think at least in public they seem pretty adamant that they haven't broken any rules. They're like, well, we follow the rules, So obviously they're always going to say that. So take that with a pinch of salt, I suppose. But I don't think they've intentionally cheated. I think it is a bit of a grey area, really. I actually thought the FIA's penalty was quite fair. I mean, the fundamentals are obviously they used the front brake ducts last year, so they're fine, but they didn't use the rear brake ducts last year. They then used them this year, which then, they've used past information and it's a listed part this year. So the only thing really wrong with it is that they didn't use them last year, but actually they got the drawings legally last year. They just chose against it because they had a different type of car. So it's, it's a bit of a weird one, really, isn't it? It is sort of a grey area. I think if you look at it like that, you can see how it is against the rules, and you can see why they've got a penalty. But they legally obtained these drawings. They completely legally obtained everything last year. This year the rules have changed, but you can't forget what you've learned. You've been sent these CAD drawings, you've looked at these CAD drawings. I think my understanding is that they've then effectively used these CAD drawings to produce this year's parts, which is when the issue is. But you can't forget what you've learned. So I think that would have been impossible. But it's just purely the fact they didn't use these exact drawings last year is the issue, which to me makes it such a minor non-point. If they just whacked these rear brake ducts on last year's car, then there would be no issue whatsoever this year. So and also let's. I know cheating is cheating, and a part of a car is a part of a car, but it is brake ducts. Yes, they do make a big aerodynamic impact these days, but actually, it's not a front wing. It's not a whole engine. It's not anything huge. It is helping them, but it's not like they'd be down with Alfa Romeo, unfortunately, currently at the back. So overall, it is a kind of minor thing. That's why I thought their penalty was fair. 15 points, which is not insignificant when you're in the midfield battle. 400,000 euros, again, not insignificant. It's still a fair chunk of money, nowhere near what McLaren got, several years ago. But I think it's fair. I do think it's slightly odd that they got to carry on using them. I understand that's because the infraction was in the design process rather than in the actual use of the parts or the parts themselves. It was more of a, well, look, you've effectively taken a shortcut here by using the CAD drawings instead of using pictures. So we'll penalise you for taking that shortcut rather than we'll penalise you because these parts are just out and out illegal. So yeah, I think I can understand where the teams are coming from, protesting. They're saying, well, cheating's cheating, sort of thing, and obviously they're gonna want to, particularly teams like Renault that are in a close fight with them, they're going to want to, compromise Racing Point as much as possible. But actually, I think it's fair, and I don't know where this is going to go. This could go anywhere. It could end up in them getting thrown out the championship this year. It could end up being FIA going, no, we've done enough. That's it. This could go anywhere, and it is quite interesting. And I think it's been a while. Probably the Ferrari McLaren one of, where was that, 2007, 2008? 2007, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah. It's been the biggest controversy since then, hasn't it? It's really bubbling up, and there's an awful lot of teams getting involved. So it's going to be an interesting sort of probably couple of months to support on for as to see where this one will go.
Absolutely. Well, Racing Point has received a reprimand from Formula One stewards at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix over continued use of its brake ducts. So it seems they're in trouble again because they're using the same design. So it had broken the regulations. I think one clear thing to remember in all of this, whether it's technical or sporting, is have you broken the regulations, yes or no? That's it. Simple as that. Yes or no? Yes. Then what can be done about it? And I think in this occasion, the question is that there was a mention of, I think Zach Brown mentioned it. They said they got the design from photograph and analysis and copied it, but they couldn't have copied the internals. Somebody at Mercedes had to have given them that internal information. And this is where it's all going to come out. So there's lots of juicy gossip to come out there.
Just this is the thing which we love about Formula One. This is what differentiates us from every other sport that's out there. We love a good race, but for the first. I started watching Formula One in 1992. Nigel Mansell's winning season. That got me into Formula One. So 28 years? It's the off-track politics that brings us in and just grabs us, by every single year by what the next wonderful bit of politics is going to be about this wonderful sport.
Absolutely. And I will just say, final point, actually, I just want to ask you, Tim, customer cars. You mentioned years ago Sterling Moss would win a customer car. Yeah. You don't see a problem with customer cars. I couldn't see a customer car beating a works team now. And I think that's the problem. I just can't see a works team allowing a customer to win. I would
challenge you to say that, we've always wanted to see grids of 26, 28 cars. Would you take... if 4 teams came in and they said they were given a budget of 50, 60 million for the year to run a customer car, would you say no to that?
I would say if they were to do that, what they should bring into racing, and this would be quite topical and unpopular for a lot of people, I think that they would need to bring in, right, let's say we had a 26, 28 car grid. Okay, let's say we had a 28 car grid. And we had points finishers for every single car that crossed the line. Yeah. Okay, so that means the cars battling for 18th, 19th. Right now, there is a point system already in play for every single car that finishes. We just don't see it. Now, we heard about it a few years ago, I think, when it was the Caterhams racing Marussias, something like that. And we heard about this non-transparent system. I think if there was a transparent system that meant all the cars could battle and there was battling all the way down the grid, then I think there's a system that could be found that would work. But based on the current Formula One system, it just doesn't work. And I think Formula One right now, where the big problem is, has always been the advantage for Ferrari, the extra money they receive, the extra benefits they receive. They need to restart Formula One. Formula One has always been getting to this point. There are less and less cars on the grid, less and less competitive nature to the cars. They need a bit of a reset because technology has overtaken the sport. Branding exercise has overtaken the sport, and they need to really understand what is Formula One. One day cars, like if you think about years ago, Formula One technology was used a lot to develop road cars. And I know they say loosely about hybrid, but it's not that. Road cars have got traction control and lots of stuff in now you don't find in a Formula One car. I think that at some point in history you have to find a balance where a sport belongs. And I talk about horse racing, and I say, well, we don't need horse racing now. We've got cars. Why do we still have horse racing? There is an element of man and beast, as it were, that people see as a combination of history and perfection. And I think it's the same with man and machine. I see that one day we'll have computer cars that drive 3 seconds a lap faster than man and machine. But I think there is a balance in terms of what are we finding from drivers and cars. And I think that's a balance for Formula One. So competitive teams, competitive income, and competitive driving as a sport. That's really where we need Formula One to find a balance as it moves into the future. And I think Ross Brawn has his head screwed on his shoulders in that area, obviously, but if you're going to be asking the teams, what should we do? You're always going to get the wrong answer. Bernie Ecclestone always said, Formula One, it's not a democracy. Yeah, it needs someone to steer the sport. And I think that right now it's going to be tough times ahead for Liberty Media to make it balanced. Mercedes are winning. They don't want to lose out on winning. Ferrari were up there, will be up there again. They don't want to lose on all their money. They're going to have to find a balance. I think that's going to be the future of Formula One. But we'll wait and see, chaps. I just want to say big thanks for coming on today. You're a bit of chat in very hot rooms, no doubt. And thank you all for listening as well. It's been, I think, an enjoyable 70th anniversary Grand Prix. I think if we had more time, it'd be nice to talk a bit more about Formula One, but we'll leave that to another day because I think in the history of Grand Prix, there's so many points we could have talked about. And that's it for now. Thank you, Alex, for coming on today and joining us.
Yeah, I think if we were to do a podcast on Formula One as a whole, we could probably speak for probably the next 2 weeks straight, I'd imagine, the three of us, because, it's an awfully big subject to talk upon, but I guess we won't touch on that one today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot to talk about. So big thanks for joining us. And thank you, Tim, as well. Bit of jovial chat. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in today. Do like and subscribe. It supports what we do. And do let us know your thoughts on the racing in the comments. And we'll be setting up a Discord channel as well to discuss more about Formula One and hopefully get more of your comments into future podcasts as well. But that's it from us for now. As ever, more soon. Hello viewers, well thanks for watching the video today. Do like and subscribe, it supports what we do. Do become a YouTube member. YouTube Patreon supports all of our content you see on the channel, and of course lots of gaming from retro to modern games. I love it all in terms of racing action. So click on one of the two videos just there to find out more.